Our wounds, our brokenness will be redeemed through the resurrection, through life everlasting. And as we come here today on this third Sunday in this time of Easter and hear this beautiful account of Jesus' resurrection, it is a good time for us to plummet this great mystery of our faith that we profess every time we say the Nicene Creed, which we do each week here, or the Apostles' Creed at the beginning of a rosary, that we believe in the resurrection of the dead and life everlasting. There's something about when Jesus appears to his disciples that is familiar but also mysterious at the same time. Last weekend, as we proclaimed the scriptures on Divine Mercy Sunday, we heard the account of Jesus appearing in the upper room where the disciples were out of fear. And we know that his wounds were present in his resurrected body. He told Thomas to put your fingers in the marks of my hands and feet and put your hand into my side where that lance pierced me. That the wounds that Christ endured have been redeemed by God through the resurrection of the dead. And as it is with Jesus, so it is with us. Now, somehow, even after that second appearance of Jesus in the upper room, they decided, this band of followers of Jesus, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, and the rest, decided that they were going to go back to their original profession. So they left Jerusalem, about a 7 days walk from Jerusalem to the Sea of Galilee, and they headed there, and Peter decided to go fishing. We could tell that he was a little disoriented. He did not know what to do. And we know that certainly for any of us who have experienced loss or grief in our lives, that grief, the death of someone we love, is very disorienting. Sometimes we just don't know what to do. So Peter went back to his old profession, still uncertain about what he was being called to do or to be. So he was out all night fishing. He had caught nothing. Discouraged, I'm sure, still sad at what to do with Jesus being crucified and experiencing him raised from the dead. Jesus is more than a ghost. He has a body, he has wounds, but still there is something about him that is recognizable, but still something rather mysterious. So once again, Jesus works a miracle. They had caught nothing. And in this conversation between this stranger on the shore and Peter and the beloved disciple in the boat, they cast their net one more time. And as they listened to the Lord, they caught such an abundant amount of fish they could barely haul it in. And the disciple whom Jesus loved in John's gospel is all of us. He makes this profession of faith, it is the Lord. Peter jumps into the water and swims to shore to see his friend Jesus raised from the dead. And then they have another meal together. I refer to this gospel as breakfast on the beach. Isn't it nice when you can have breakfast on the beach? So there was a little charcoal fire with some bread and some fish, and Jesus invites them to take their catch and bring it along, and it is made into a meal that they share once again. Jesus took what they had, the bread and the fish, and they offered it to the disciples once again, wrought with grief and uncertainty. And in, again, the breaking of the bread, they knew it was the Lord. They dared not ask any more questions. They knew with all their heart and soul it was Jesus raised from the dead. And they shared this meal one more time. Come and eat this great breakfast. Now we know that sometimes our wounds, our injuries are more than physical ones. It could be more than the ravages of cancer or some other terminal illness. It could be, other things besides something bodily. Peter was hurting. Peter was wounded because of his denial. Can you imagine what it felt like for Peter, knowing that his friend was being led to his crucifixion and what Jesus said of him was true, that he was going to deny him 3 times before the cock crowed, and what happened came true. Now, Peter has to, with a great embarrassment, I know I would be embarrassed, to have to see Jesus again. In the book that we provided at Christmas time, Into His Likeness by Edward Shree, he has a little section on this part of the gospel passage and why maybe Jesus questioned him 3 times with this probing question, do you love me? Now we know in Greek there are many words for the word love that in English we translate just in one way. And this question that Jesus is asking Peter is not to embarrass him, but rather to meet Peter where he was. What kind of love do you have for me? Jesus, or Peter, do you love me? And that's a great question for us to ask ourselves. What are we willing to do for someone we love? That's what Jesus was trying to get at with Peter. And I think it's really ironic when we think about this 21st chapter in John's Gospel, which is definitely nearing the end, is very similar to those first chapters where Jesus is meeting the disciples for the first time. What does Jesus say to them at the end of this gospel? 2 simple words: follow me. The same words that Jesus spoke to them when they were in the boat the first time, when they were being called, and Jesus says, I will make you fishers of men and women. Jesus says to them one more time, let all of your hurt, let all of your wounds, let all of your uncertainty be healed by the power of God's love, strong enough to reach through death, so that Jesus is raised from the dead. We know him by the wounds that have been healed, by the marks in his hands and his feet, by the lance mark in his side. And we believe this great mystery of faith, which is proclaimed by our church, that we believe in the resurrection of the dead and the life to world to come. We believe that death is not the end for us, and neither is just heaven. We believe that one day God will return and restore the earth to its original state before the fall of Adam and Eve. We believe that Jesus will return again in glory. We believe in the resurrection of the dead and life everlasting. There are 2 things that Jesus asks of his disciples. Come, have breakfast, which he's saying to us right now. Come have breakfast on my word. Come have breakfast on my body and blood. And after we have breakfast, he says these 2 simple words that I want to leave you with today. Jesus says to them, follow me to the resurrection of the dead and life everlasting. Amen.